Awesome. Sweet. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Cecily. I'm a third-year chemistry student at UW, and today I'm going to talk to you about how chemistry can push the limits of solar energy. So I just want you to start by having you picture sunlight. When you're imagining that in your head, what do you see? You might think of the rays of sunlight that catch dust as they fall across a room. You might think of rain, snow, or mist as they catch the sun as it falls. But I'd like to offer you a new perspective on what you might imagine when you think of this mundane piece of life. Because more often than not, when we imagine sunlight, we're actually conjuring the memory of what it looks like when light interacts with objects, like raindrops or dust. So when you start to think of light as a thing that can interact, you'll begin to see its interactions with everything. We feel the consequences of these light interactions every day, running from the almost unnoticeable, like the sunlight hitting your arm and warming it, to the profoundly essential, like plants unfurling new leaves, all because sunlight is energy. And harnessing this simple fact of life has driven us to use sunlight as a source of our own energy using solar panels. So when sunlight interacts with a solar panel, it provides the energy for a cascade of events that produce electricity. When sunlight hits the panel interacts with that light by absorbing it, causing a movement of charged particles within the material that eventually will get collected to cool our homes, power the lights in our buildings, charge our phones, you name it. And due to significant technological advancement, we've helped solar panels produce more power from the same amount of light, making solar power one of the most popular renewable energy sources. In fact, as we decarbonize our energy grids, we plan to use solar a lot more. So in the US, we've set our sights on eliminating carbon emissions by 2050. In fact, solar could play a huge part in that. In the Solar Futures study published in 2021 by the National Renewable Energy Lab, so NREL, they found that with aggressive cost reductions, supportive policies, and large-scale electrification, solar could account for as much as 40% of our nation's electricity supply by 2035 and 45% by 2050. So 2050 might seem like a long ways away, but to reach this goal using the latest solar panels, we'd have to produce 4 times the amount of power from our solar farms than we do currently. And we'd have to keep up that production every year until 2050. It's not intuitive to think about how ambitious this goal is just by considering power production. So we're going to consider this goal in terms of how much space in solar farm area this kind of production requires using the numbers from the Solar Future study. So let's consider the great state of Washington. Using the most efficient solar panels we have now, we'd have to cover this entire area of Washington in solar farms to meet our energy goals by 2050. This is nearly a quarter of Washington state. This would mean that in order to fill this square by 2050, we'd have to produce 4 Seattle's worth of area of solar farms per year, every year until 2050 just to fill up the square. But because we need to increase our solar power production by 4 times, we have to consider more than just the kinds of materials we use to make the panel. We have to consider the manufacturing that goes into making these solar farms, which we would also have to increase by 4 times. And we just currently do not have the capacity to do that. So if we don't have the capacity to produce this amount of solar panels, how can we actually get there? Well, if history has taught us anything, we'll need to find new ways of helping solar panels produce more power from the same amount of sunlight, which would use fewer solar panels to produce the same amount of energy. That way, we could put far less stress on the manufacturing costs of solar panels, as well as having the panels themselves take up less space and having the energy that we produce be far cheaper. So if we can find a way to make solar panels produce more energy, we can afford to deploy fewer panels while still meeting our energy goals. But this is harder than it might seem because the amount of energy solar panels can produce from sunlight is inherently limited. So one of the inherent limits has to do with the fact that solar panels can't actually collect all of the sunlight that reaches them. This is because sunlight is made up of a broad range of energy, and solar panels can only absorb a certain portion of this broad range, while the rest just passes right through it wasted. This broad range of energy is the electromagnetic spectrum, and the sunlight that we enjoy is made up of energy ranging all the way from high energy ultraviolet light to low energy infrared light and even lower. We don't normally think about light like this, but all things, including us, absorb small portions of this broad range. So to visualize this, I just want to bring out my phone, a prop, and you can do that too if you want. When I put my finger over my phone's flashlight, what do you see? You're seeing my finger light up red, but that's because your eye is seeing all of the light that is not being scattered or otherwise absorbed by my finger. That's the light that's reaching your eyeballs right now. It's being transmitted through my finger. You can think about solar panels in a similar way. They too absorb UV light, visible light, and even some near-infrared light, but there is a portion of the sun's spectrum that is simply too low in energy for them to produce electricity from, kind of like how this light is passing through my finger. Helping solar panels capture this light will help them overcome one of these inherent limits, and it's one of the greatest challenges that we face to make solar panels themselves more efficient. But we've already talked about how solar panels work. If the light that hits the panel doesn't have enough energy, it won't start this cascade of events to produce electricity. So the real question that we're asking is, how can we turn lower energy light into higher energy light that can actually be used by the solar panel? Normally when we ask these kinds of questions, we can look to nature for answers, but this kind of thing does not happen in nature. When things emit light in nature, which biologists call biofluorescence, small bits of energy are lost between the initial absorption and the eventual emission of light, meaning that the emitted light holds less energy than what was originally absorbed. So for example, the reason why I have scorpions up here is that when you shine UV light onto scorpions, they will fluoresce green. The same thing happens with some lichen. You can shine UV light on this lichen, and it will fluoresce yellow. And finally, we can take this coral as well as some algae that is encircling the coral. When UV light is shined on it, both the coral and the algae will fluoresce green and red, respectively. So it's quite common for biofluorescence to occur, but it only goes one way. It only goes from higher energy to low and never up the spectrum. To accomplish this, some scientists like myself have focused their efforts towards using a system of materials that can work together to do a process called upconversion, which is named for the phenomena of converting this light up in energy. The job of an upconversion system is to sit at the back of a solar panel and collect that low energy wasted light, but the magic is that it can actually convert the energy of that light into higher energy light that the solar panel can actually use to produce electricity. So let's talk about how this is even possible. How can we use low energy light to produce higher energy light? So there are two components of this system. The first is an absorber, whose job it is to collect that wasted light, and then pass its energy onto the second component, which we'll call the emitter, whose job it is to emit the light that the solar panel can absorb. Once the absorber absorbs that light, which we'll see here as it turning this deep orange, it holds that energy for a finite amount of time. And within that time window, this next step of the process can take place. So while it's holding on to this energy, the absorber can pass it along to the emitter, which it does by essentially crashing into it. Once this happens, the absorber relaxes, waiting to collect more light while the emitter can move on to this next step. So let's just focus on what's happening here. Two emitters holding on to the energy that they were passed by the absorber can combine their energy so that one of them will release higher energy light than was originally absorbed. This happens when they collide with one another, allowing one emitter to unload its energy onto the other, resulting in having one emitter that will fluoresce higher energy light while the other relaxes and can do this process all over again. This will happen over and over and over as long as there's wasted light to be collected. And together, these two components make up a system that can help solar panels produce more energy from sunlight. So like magic, this process can take us from the near infrared to the yellow, from red to blue, which is what you're seeing up there. But this technology would be in solar panels everywhere if not for one small complication. So currently, the best upconversion systems that we have, which convert wasted light the most efficiently, often use metals like platinum, palladium, or iridium as part of the material that makes up their absorber. But these are incredibly expensive materials to rely on for grid-scale solar applications. So just to exemplify this, let's start with a thought experiment. So let's say we approach some solar farm manufacturers and we ask if they'd like to fit out their solar panels with the cheapest upconversion system we have now, which is a platinum upconversion system. And they come back to us with some cost criteria. We have to limit the cost increase of the solar panel to just under 2%, which comes out to a budget for us of about $2 million. So let's say we get approved to cover this square kilometer covering Town Hall, or with solar panels fitted with the cheapest precious metal upconversion systems. How much area do you think we could cover with our $2 million budget using this platinum upconversion system? I want to see fingers of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I wish I could see you. The light is really, yeah. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of ones. The ones have it. We could only cover about 0.5% of this square, which, if you're wondering, would cover about half of this block. So Town Hall and like whatever building is next to it. I think it's a residential building or something. But what's worse is that relying on these precious metals, particularly platinum, keeps us reliant on mining practices that are not only environmentally hazardous, so completely counterproductive to what their use is for, but have a long history of worker exploitation. And so in order to fit solar panels with these materials on a large scale, we need to be able to find upconversion systems with absorbers that are made of something more scalable and isn't environmentally disastrous or otherwise harmful to humanity to use. The material that I research to replace these precious metals are a class of dyes called squaring dyes. These dyes are free of precious metals and are made of stable, earth-abundant materials. So what you're looking at here is a sample of a thiosquarine dye. It looks very pretty in gold and green. These squarings are used using the same kind of chemistry to make indigo dyes, which dye everything like your jeans blue, your hat's blue, everything blue. Indigo dyes are extremely cheap to make. They can be made by the truckload. So let's return to this thought experiment again, using these dyes as our absorbers. How much area of this 1 kilometer square do you think that we could cover if we replaced that absorber with the precious metal absorbers, or the opposite, I guess? Yeah, I want to see hands. I see some 4s, I see some 3s. It's actually 100% of the square. It's crazy how the math works out like that. It's 100% of the square. So we're actually able to use these dyes to upconvert near IR light to yellow light, red to yellow light, red to green, red to blue. It's honestly almost poetic how we're able to do something so out of this world with scalable, earth-abundant materials for the purpose of saving this planet. We're also able to demonstrate that we can use this material in an upconversion layer that can actually allow a solar cell, which is a simplified lab-scale version of a solar panel, to produce electricity from light that they would normally waste. So I'm going to show you two scenarios here. One scenario is where we're going to shine red light onto a solar cell without an upconversion helping layer behind it. And then the second scenario, we'll put an upconversion layer behind the solar cell. So what we see is that in a scenario where there's just the solar cell, when we shine this red light onto the solar cell, the result is this black line you see at the bottom. That's because no photocurrent can be produced from that light shining on and off and on and off, because what that light is doing is being simply transmitted through the cell, wasted. But when we do put an upconversion layer behind that solar cell, what we can see is that as we shine the light on and off, we see a photocurrent response, so we see electricity being produced in the actual solar cell because our upconversion layer is emitting light from that transmitted light that would normally have been wasted. So even if upconversion layers could only release a quarter of the light that they normally collect using these systems in solar panels, we would be able to increase solar panel efficiencies by up to 9%. So what does that look like? If we could make this entire square that we saw earlier 9% more efficient, how much space could we save? We could cut out this huge chunk of area just from that 9% improvement, which in terms of space, this is the area equivalent of 10 Seattles. But if you're more fiscally minded, like myself, just these soft costs, so the costs associated with installation, permitting, and labor to cover that land area that we just saved would have cost us $3.9 billion. And commercializing these systems cannot come soon enough. If we put upconversion systems inside all of the solar panels that we deployed just last year, we could power every single home in the state of Washington with just the extra energy that we produce from these upconversion systems. So when you leave and you see light, the sunlight, I want you to remember all of the chemistry that it can do and all of the energy that it really holds, because whether you like it or not, our future and the future of our kids and cousins and nieces and nephews will depend on us creating a clean energy system. And if we plan to depend on solar, the least that we can do is give it a helping hand. Thank you.